Well, welcome everyone. So exciting to see folks here today. Happy Friday. My name is Regina Celestin Williams, and I'm the Executive Director at SV at Home. And at Silicon Valley at Home, we're so excited to host you all for this conversation about the regional measure for a $20 billion affordable housing bond that will be on all of our ballots in November. This is an extremely exciting time, and we're so grateful for you joining us in this work today. We're going to talk about the real impacts it will make in communities throughout our county, because policy and action at home is a monthly informal discussion convening housers to engage on hot housing topics. So every month, we select a topic or a current event, and we bring in an expert or two or three in this case to give a brief presentation and also to have an open discussion. Allow you all to ask questions, to float new, float new ideas, and also so that we can all identify ways that we can work together and share in the action. So today, before we begin, I would like to acknowledge the traditional, ancestral, unceded territory of the Muwekma Ohlone, Ramaytush Ohlone, Tamian Nation, and Amut Mutsun, on which we are learning, working, and organizing today. We at Silicon Valley at Home are committed to honoring and making visible the indigenous people and tribes that were intentionally displaced from their land and who remain here in Silicon Valley and are a part of our community. So with that, I'll hand it over to our moderator for today's discussion, SV at Home's Director of Policy, Matthew Reed.
Thank you so much, Regina, and welcome everybody. This afternoon, we're super excited to have you here. I want to start by just establishing some ground rules that we use for this space. We really want to ensure that the conversation and relationships here today remain respectful and productive. Please be kind and courteous to each other. No rude comments or personal attacks. We do encourage asking questions and listening as we learn and engage with each other. Please remember that today's event is focused on the individual and community benefits of affordable housing. We'd like to keep questions in the chat on topic. Sometimes the chat can get a little bit lively if you find that that is distracting you from the rest of the discussion that we're having. We encourage you to consider closing the chat temporarily. If a person is disruptive or otherwise violates the codes of conduct, they may be removed with or without warning. We don't expect that to be happening today. So with that, I want to begin. First of all, I am excited to share this rich discussion with you. We are going to begin today with a short briefing on RM4, the $20 billion regional housing bond, which is coming to your ballots in just a few months. Look for them in the mail at the beginning of October and get them in before the first week of November. Then we are going to have three amazing speakers, each of whom in different ways are serving folks in Santa Clara County who need access to safe, stable, affordable homes. And they will share with us why this bond is so important to their work and their communities that they're serving. We're going to close up in a discussion and take some questions from you all. I just want to start by acknowledging that we have made some major leaps in the last 2 months. Those of you who've been following along at home, we now have ballot language, which was passed through the regional entity, which means the measure is going to be on the ballot in all 9 counties. It is regional measure 4, so we're shifting from the affordable housing bond to regional measure 4. We've also seen that the measure has increased from what was a discussion about potentially $10 billion to $20 billion. It happened very, very quickly, but the impact for us is huge. The polling is looking good and the campaign is ready to launch. So let's take a little bit of a look at what RM4 is actually going to do. Next slide. $20 billion affordable housing regional bond is going to have a tremendous benefit across the region. It's going to be producing affordable homes for as many as 500,000 low-income households over the lifetime of these developments. It's going to create jobs, and it's going to leverage additional resources being brought into our communities. The $20 billion bond will have $2.4 billion for the Santa Clara County, and an additional $2.1 billion that will go directly to the city of San Jose. That means $4.5 billion of new resources coming into the county to provide affordable housing and address the needs of keeping folks in their homes. Next slide. So I want to talk a little bit about the structure of the measure and the different entities that are involved. So the Bay Area Housing Finance Authority was created. It's a new regional agency, and it was created by the legislature, AB 1487. And a number of things happened. The legislature created some parameters for how the resources would be spent. Were they to issue a bond? And that's what we're talking about today. BAFA has, as a regional entity, put RM4 on the ballot in all 9 counties in the Bay Area. So it hasn't been a county by county decision. This is something that's happening at the regional level. But BAFA has rules and structure that is set by the legislature. Let me just point out the approach from the beginning here has been a 3 Ps approach. The legislation explicitly is intended to have flexibility to respond to the complexity of the needs and provide opportunities to respond to those needs that we know exist in our community. The basic breakdown is that 20% of the money that is collected through this parcel tax will be held by the regional entity, the Bay Area Housing Finance Agency. That entity is accountable to the entire Bay Area, but they will be managing and distributing 20% of the funds. Through the deliberative process at BAFA, which falls under the Metropolitan Transportation Commission, there is now direction that says that the allocation of these regional funds will use a return to source model. So each county will receive funding support in proportion to the local receipts that are going into this pool regionally. 80% of the funds are coming directly back to the county and the city. These are little, and we'll talk about them in a little simpler way earlier, but you can see that there's money set aside for production and preservation. Those percentages are the minimums. There's then 28%, which is flexible, that can be used for other housing related projects, but can also be put into production or preservation activities. And then we'll talk in just a second about the protection piece. Next slide. So what you saw in those circles was essentially the outline of what needs to become an expenditure plan. And there's a process that has been established by the legislation. So the city of San Jose and Santa Clara County will develop separate expenditure plans. This will happen after the election, and I think will be in earnest at the beginning of 2025. The city of San Jose has already adopted, and we'll talk about this in a second, some initial guidelines that happened in June. The county plan must be developed in consultation with the cities. and there must be public comment from community and stakeholders in public spaces. The county plan may fund projects in San Jose, and these plans must be submitted to the Bay Area Housing Finance Agency Board for approval. In the first year, plans can't be submitted within the first 3 months after the passage of the bill, the measure. After the first year, plans are due on July 1st, unless there's already been adopted multi-year plan. Next slide. So at the county level, there are some rules that are set by the structure of the legislation. So the production has to go to rental or ownership. It has to follow or reflect the regional housing needs allocation, which targets certain percentages for low, very low, and extremely low income households. Some of you are familiar with this. This is the metric that's been used in the housing element development. 28% of the money can be flexible, meaning it can go to production or preservation or other activities that support affordable housing. A minimum of 15% must go to preservation. Preservation of existing housing must become deed restricted through this process. And then 5% was set aside for tenant protections. However, that required constitutional amendment, which did not make its way through the legislature. So for now, those protection funds are going to be redirected to either production or preservation. So this is governing what the county is walking into. Next slide. The city of San Jose, as I said, has already adopted some high-level guidelines. So in June, the city council decided that in the construction of new affordable housing, they would continue to follow the 45% prioritization for extremely low-income households, that they would prioritize the existing pipeline of projects, and that there would be a staff review of the current process of allocating money for new development. For the flexible funds, they agreed that this was the place where they wanted to emphasize immediate, low barrier, flexible solutions that provide safe and dignified shelter. This could include emergency interim housing, hotel motel acquisitions, land acquisition for safe parking, sleeping, upgrading or constructing congregate shelters, etc. For the preservation piece, the council, and I think this was the intention when the legislation was passed, want to prioritize existing affordable housing that might be at risk of being lost in our communities. Again, on the protection side, right now we don't have the authority to spend that money in the way that I think we had all hoped. And so those resources are going to be reallocated back to affordable housing production. So back into that 52%. Next slide. So just a little bit of context, the $4.5 billion going to Santa Clara County is roughly, it's over 20% of the total for the Bay Area. So for the first time, everybody is going to have skin in the game. Everybody is going to be paying into this pool, and every county in the region is going to have an obligation to invest in affordable housing to do their part. In the past, Santa Clara County has been a leader. We have other cities that have passed bonds to fund affordable housing, but this time everybody's going to be a part of the solution. Next slide. And we know that we already have a significant need because we have developments that are in process, in the pipeline, ready to go. You'll see again that Santa Clara County is ahead and well positioned to use this money. We're going to have no problem moving these resources into making sure we're moving forward on the existing pipeline of projects that are ready to go. Next slide. So some of you know, and you will hear, that there is a related measure to our RM4. Right now, in order to pass a housing-focused general obligation bond, you have to have a 2/3 vote, which means that a third of the people in our community can essentially veto new investment in affordable housing. This measure, Proposition 5, is a constitutional amendment. It will be on the ballot statewide, and it will lower that threshold to 55%. We are not going to get RM4, the regional measure, passed unless Proposition 5 passes at the state level. If it does pass, it will apply to our measure. So, good news. Polling very well. There's a lot of confidence that this will move through at the state level. And so as we go forward, you're going to see that we're focusing on the regional measure, RM4. But that's not because we're not paying attention to what's happening with Proposition 5. It's just right now, that's where our energy needs to be focused. Next slide. So, Working Partnerships USA and Silicon Valley at Home are co-leading the campaign in Santa Clara County. We are the local effort, which is part of the 9-county regional campaign. The truth is, this doesn't pass without strong support in Santa Clara County. This is going to happen because we, all of us, do the work to make it happen, and it's not going to happen across a region unless we make it happen here in Santa Clara County. Next slide. So we are very excited to have guests here today to talk to us about why this is important to them and their work. I want to take just a moment to introduce them, and then we'll have them give brief presentations, and then we'll enter into a conversation. So Randy Suda is the president and CEO of Alta Housing, where he has led since leaving the city of Mountain View as the community development director, where he worked for over 10 years. Randy has received many awards and accolades. I think the one that he is proudest of is that he was the recipient of the SV at Home annual Bringing It Home Award in 2018, acknowledging his work with the city of Mountain View and welcoming him back into our movement as the director, the president at Alta. Andrea is the director of community impact and policy at Somos Mayfair, which is on the east side of San Jose. Andrea was born and raised on the east side of San Jose. Andrea started at Somos in 2019, managing the policy and organizing work, and has moved up to director level and is now responsible for a broad range of programs. Luckily, she is a committed organizer in her soul and continues to bring policy advocacy expertise, really grounded in community empowerment, into coalition spaces across the city. So we are so pleased that as she moves into leadership, she hasn't forgotten us. Marie is the executive director of Sunnyvale Community Services, where she has been the leader since 2010. Sunnyvale Community Services is the safety net for the communities most vulnerable in the city of Sunnyvale. Their mission is to prevent homelessness and hunger in our local community, and Marie oversees a great team providing emergency financial assistance, food distribution, case management, student readiness for school. She is an essential moral voice in Sunnyvale and a recognized leader around the county. So we are honored to have you all with us. Randy, let me turn it over to you and have you share with us a little bit about why this measure is so important to you and your work.
Oh, thank you, Matthew. And I'm so thrilled to be here speaking about RM4. I guess from my perspective, this is Santa Clara County and the Bay Area's opportunity to really empower ourselves and take charge of our affordable housing future. I think, as Matthew has mentioned, Santa Clara County and the Bay Area, we're really blessed with this constellation of great affordable housing developers, managers, operators, service providers, advocates, and all of you who are supporters of affordable housing. And if anything, this county has demonstrated that we know how to get affordable housing built as long as the funding and the money is there. We've demonstrated that through Measure A, and we can do it again with the passage of RM4. Now, as Matthew mentioned, this is not a theoretical concept. If RM4 passes, we immediately, there in this county there's a well-established pipeline ready to go of over 80 projects encompassing over 10,000 affordable housing. So these are projects already in process. And RM4 is one of the keys to getting those projects unstuck, getting them under construction, and getting them to a place where we can begin to house our residents in this county. So, because I'm old and I've been doing this a while, I want to just reflect back and point out the fact that this is not an effort that has been turned on over the last year or two. This is really something that the Affordable Housing Network in our greater community, this is something we've laid the groundwork on since 2017 with the convening of the CASA organization, the Committee to House the Bay Area, and in 2018 with the adoption of the CASA Compact, which called for the creation of BAFA and the funding of a regional funding measure. So behind the scenes, affordable housing organizations have been really laying the groundwork for quite a long time now. A lot of key nonprofit organizations have already undertaken internship programs, training programs, leadership academies to prepare for this moment, to broaden the depth of talent and the staffing resources to get this kind of work done, preparing for the day when we can get something like RM4 on the ballot. So this is something we've been working to now, for over 6 or 7 years. And I just want to leave you with, one thought, from my perspective, is that this is a momentous undertaking. It's going to take all of us, from developers and service providers, elected officials, every city and county in this area, and it's going to take all of you as advocates and community members. They will take all of us to pass this measure and make this happen. And, at the end of the day, let's keep in mind, we're housing members of our communities. That's who this measure will help. It will house members of our communities. And to me, this is one of the most powerful community building things that we can undertake. I did a quick check right before this panel. We, as Alta Housing, we work in 4 communities in San Mateo and Santa Clara counties. So in those 4 cities in which we work, our residents work in 8 of the local school districts, 3 of the private schools, grocery stores, 2 of the hospitals, restaurants and childcare, and yes, tech firms. These are folks in our communities. These are community members, people we talk to, we see, who serve us each and every day of our lives. So we're not building housing for them. We're really building housing for us, those in our community. So I leave you with that.
Well said. Andrea, bring us down. What are these resources going to mean for your community and the work that you're doing?
Everything. Everything. I think we're really excited about this opportunity to see this amount of resources being brought into the city, but really into our community, you know, the communities that have been for generations disinvested in, are still feeling the impacts of redlining, are still severely impacted and are currently going through you know, displacement. So we're really excited about all of the possibilities for this amount of funding and resources that can be brought into the community. We're hearing and seeing a lot of the same issues and the same challenges in the community. Folks are living in fear of being displaced, of being evicted. There's always a need for more housing. There's always a need for us to think differently about housing and think more about opportunities that include home ownership opportunities. And so we're really excited, again, given all of the needs that we're continuing to see, for the opportunities that this funding is gonna bring. I think one thing that we're really excited about to continue to see as Somos Mayfair and you know, with our Si Se Puede collective partners is the opportunities to partner with affordable housing developers to continue to bring housing, which is a, you know, a very essential need, but partnering with community partners in communities to offer an array of services that we know community members need. Somos Mayfair, along with the Latino Business Foundation, Excite Credit Union, are on the ground floor of a Quetzal apartment complex here in Mayfair, which is a 71 affordable development. And so it's really exciting to be able to be there with residents in community and to be able to partner and provide services and supports for folks who are directly in the same spaces that we're in. And so we're really excited about the amount of, you know, funding allocation that the city is already thinking about in terms of production, so that we can continue to see those kinds of partnerships come alive in the community. We know that with the funding and with the amount of resources coming into the community, that policy work, that advocacy work is just as important. Like, we've got all the money, that's great, but what are the things that we want to prioritize? What do we really want to see for folks? And so we're really excited to continue to see and to do that work. We know that sometimes policy work is also just as dependent as funding. You know, we can continue to advocate for more housing, for anti-displacement strategies, for preservation strategies and policies, but without the funding and the resources and to put behind these strategies, then that work becomes more challenging or takes longer to, sometimes it takes us longer to see the impacts of those policies and strategies that we're moving forward. So we're really excited again for that as well. Just in general, I think for Somos, you know, we work really closely with a lot of other organizations, including SB at Home, but our Community Land Trust, South Bay Community Land Trust, tenant organizing organizations like Amigos de Guadalupe and Luna. And we've been really, at Sacred Heart, we've been really thinking about how do we build out a preservation ecosystem? How do we really get ready to uplift this P, one of the 3 Ps, uplift this P to continue to support that work? This work is hard. I think, you know, preservation is still not, I think, a really big priority for folks, and we're still trying to figure out, like, how do we continue to move that work? But with this amount of resources, I think we're really excited about what would it look like? What would it look like for the Community Land Trust to really have the resources and support they need to start to preserve units before we lose them? For other types of models to kind of come up in the community, in the city, thinking about community development corporations and other ways for us to start to preserve properties and preserve our community members. You know, a lot of folks, I mean, I'm sure everybody knows folks who have had to leave their community, who have to leave their neighbors, their social networks, their connections that they have. And so if folks want to remain in the communities that they've been in for decades, like, what are the strategies and ways that we can support them to do that? And we really think preservation is a very, very key piece to this puzzle, and are excited about, yeah, again, the possibilities for us to take advantage of the funding and resources coming down to really build out and strengthen that ecosystem so that we can continue to support folks in that way as well.
Yep, it sure would help to have a lot more money. Well, Marie, you have been through campaigns like this, and you also see every day the impact of the housing crisis in your work. So tell us how you're thinking about this.
Well, I just came this morning from the wall raising for the Ira D. Hall Square, which is new family housing in Sunnyvale, just this morning. It's a mid-pen housing project with 176 affordable rental units for families and individuals, which is a new trend to have mixes of sizes of families and types of people who are in affordable housing. It's going to include 45 permanent supportive housing units for unhoused individuals referred by the County of Santa Clara. It's going to have on-site programming. And what's amazing about this is the range from studios to 3-bedroom units. I had to leave early, but Consuelo Hernandez, who's our Deputy Director of Supportive Housing as I was leaving, said, more money will work, more money will help. And it's a patchwork of funding that all these developments have. The city of Sunnyvale for this development, it was $142 million, put in $13 million. And the county of Santa Clara put in $11 million. But still there had to be 7 or 8 other funders and funding sources using tax credits and state and all sorts of funding that is pulled in. So we have to keep shouting that more money is important. And the city of Sunnyvale has just opened another one with related companies, which is the Meridian, which is for development disabled individuals in Sunnyvale. Again, a mix of ranges of sizes with families as well as individuals. It's something that we feel passionate about because we see every day the impact of people being close to being unhoused or being unhoused. And we've been around since 1970. And so we've seen the valley change, but at the same time, people want to stay in their neighborhoods, as Andrea so well said. Our business is preventing homelessness and hunger. People are hungry and food insecure because the cost of housing. And so the easy part of our mission of preventing homelessness and hunger is the food part, which is very hard to do. But it's easier to say to somebody, well, let's feed somebody. But housing them in our community is a more difficult lift to do politically as well as with the communities. And I'm excited that Sunnyvale and our part of the county are leaning in. Besides these 2 very recent projects this year, there are 3 more that are in the funnel in Sunnyvale alone, which tells me that our politicians and our communities are leaning in, partnering. That P word is so important. How do we partner across the different organizations? And like Somos Mayfair, we're the boots on the ground helping people with other things that they need if they're low income and struggling in our community, so that they are empowered and able to stay and thrive in our community, to work, to live. We get very excited about the opportunities. When openings like this happen in Sunnyvale, we have apply-a-thons. We open our doors, we have our case managers and our volunteers, and we say, you've got 2 weeks to apply. You've never done this before. It may be a little complicated. We're here to help so that people can put in their applications early and get it done and know that they have a fair chance to getting one of these magic rings of an apartment, a living space. And we also do wraparound services for people who are already housed as well as unhoused. And we served 11,000 people last year. Some people think this part of the county is not where there are extremely low income people, and there are. And of those folks, about 800 were unhoused. So they already fell through the cracks. And it takes so much to house somebody. It takes 3 times the money just in the rent alone to move somebody in. And so from an economic standpoint, it makes so much sense to preserve people and prevent homelessness, preserve the housing, but also to be able to quickly, rapidly rehouse people and give them a choice of where they want to live, how they want to live. And if they want to stay in the community that they've been in for a while, this part of the county, do it. This is a case, though, throwing money at the problem does help a lot. And so I think there's political will and community endorsement for this. We knocked on doors, we made phone calls, we've done this before, we're going to do it again. We have to be able to say, this housing can be in your backyard. To the voters, we have to say, this can happen in our part of the county, that you and your neighbors can remain housed or can find new housing. Your sons or daughters who are developmentally disabled can stay housed and be in this environment with supportive services. And we have to try and say, this is our backyard across the county. I think we've got a lot of momentum here. I'm just seeing how the size of this, $4.5 billion, if you start calling it with a B, people get attention, and it's amassing a lot of potential worth. It's not enough, and we have to say you need land, you need political action, you need the people who are going to say yes down my street or across from my house or across from my company, we're going to have this housing. So we're all in. I think our community's leaning in, and we're very, very much ready to be activated and out there.
Wonderful. You know, I'm hearing from each of you that you get how this fits and that we know how to do it. And this is like a missing piece of the puzzle that's going to leverage, a lot of other opportunities and strategies that are just held up because we don't have the housing piece figured out. Each of you is so close to the work every day. And we can get lost in numbers of units and income ranges. So I wonder if there's a person or an experience that you've had that you think about when you think about what this money can mean for our people. And I'll just throw that open. Who's first?
I'll kick it off. I mean, we had a volunteer ceremony about a few months ago, but one of the folks that was acknowledged was a woman who, now an adult, but grew up in an Alta housing community. From the time she was about 6 years old, and lived in our communities through high school along with her family. Took advantage and was supported by our resident services program, our after school academic support, went off to college and comes back and helps to volunteer now. But one of the things that she pointed out is that our housing gave her such stability, that it gave her a place, it gave her a home, that the resident services programming became part of her extended family. Right? She knew where to go for help when she needed advice, when she needed help on homework. Those kinds of things were all part of her experience growing up, and how thankful she is to have had that in her life. So that you're right, Matthew. It's, we talk a lot, especially on the development side, we talk about the numbers of units, projects, and all that. But it's when you meet those folks and you hear those stories, and there's so many of them, that it really brings it home.
Great.
Yeah, I think thank you for that question and for humanizing this issue, because I think, you're right on that we get lost in the amount of money or the data or the number of units or what have you, but we're really talking about people. And that's, to Randy's point earlier, like we're talking about housing people in our community, people that we know, people that are our neighbors, family members, our kids' teachers, like we're talking about people. And so there's so many people that come to mind from the community that that came to mind when you asked that question. A lot of our Vecinos Activos leaders, who are folks who are on our community members who are active leaders in our housing organizing team at Somos Mayfair, who have been evicted, who have had to move multiple times, who have lived with their children in their cars, who have lived with multiple family members, sometimes sharing a room, sometimes living in a living room. Like, these are the folks that are centered in the work that we're doing, and why I'm here, why I think like we're all here is for like these kinds of experiences and for the people that we know are the most impacted by this issue. And also, you know, in the case of our Vecinos Activos leaders are the folks that are really guiding us in the work that we're doing. They're pushing us as Somos Mayfair, as organizations, to think about ways to address this issue, to think about ways to continue to draw down funding, to think about alternative ways and be creative in the way that we're thinking about housing and the solutions that we're pushing at the local level with the city or the county. These are the folks that are most impacted and are also the folks that are fighting the hardest to see the changes come to the community. And so those are the folks that really come to mind, and that I think are the reasons why this work is so important. And you know, our folks who have been for years also advocating and pushing that we think about housing differently, and that we find solutions that are really going to address the needs of folks in our communities.
And yes, the stories bring it home. And I'm thinking of one young couple. They were brought to our attention and brought to our lobby by some residents who had seen that one of their son's classmates was living in his car with his girlfriend, and they were 18 and a half. And one of them had been a refugee. And they brought them here because they said, you know, we can't keep they're living on our couch and using our bathroom, but they really need a home. And we were able to enroll them in the tenant-based rental assistance that we manage for the city of Sunnyvale. And so they're one of 40, only 40, but amazing 40 families that we have now in that subsidized program, which is making the difference between their rent and the subsidy, that for 24 months, keeping them housed, wraparound case management services. And these were young people who really didn't know. If not for that couple, then they probably would have been, well, they were thrown out by their families as trash. I mean, it was literally that bad. And that gives me hope, because these are two people that they're working, they were struggling. And I think the casting that net out there and trying to help people in our community who want to be generous, who want to help, and being the solutions or the part of it that can guide people towards the affordable housing, towards the solutions. You do need organizations like Somos Mayfair and Sunnyvale Community Services who know who to call, who have the Rolodex, who have the connections, and making it possible for people to take advantage of what they're entitled to receive. To build up our community leaders. Like Somos, we have our community leaders, promotores, and they activated the city council by working with Livable Sunnyvale. They said, we want to know how to speak in front of the board of supervisors and our city council. And so Livable Sunnyvale knows how to do that. And so they matched them up and became mentors. And a couple of months later, on an important issue, our promotores lined up and spoke in front of city council. And because of that, the city council now does simultaneous translation, because of those individuals standing up and eloquently speaking about what was important. So those are the types of things that we have to continue to do, to lift people up so they can fight for what their community wants and needs, and be the connectors here.
Right. It's always valuable to know we have people power and money power, and that's a huge part of, you know, how we're going to spend this money right, and how we're going to get through the next couple of months to make sure we have it. Randy, I want to just quickly, the Measure A passed in 2016. It did get 2/3 of the vote in the county, 67%, and it has far surpassed its targets. What we often forget is before we did that, we didn't really have a functional model for building housing for the neediest folks in the community, whether they're unhoused or they have extremely low incomes. And we've created the capacity to really build income housing that gets people off the street, keeps people housed, provides an opportunity for working families that are struggling with rent. And so briefly, could you just talk about how important it is that we've learned this lesson and how great it's going to be to figure out how to keep that momentum?
I think in the simplest terms, the fact that our county has gone through the experience of Measure A, it's we we've gone through the process of seeding the soil, and we've reaped the benefits. We've harvested the crop. We know how to do this, and we know what it takes. So I think what we've found with Measure A is that if you create this pot of money and a dependable funding source with established parameters, the fact that we were able to get that money committed and out the door, and created more housing, more units than anticipated, shows that if you create this, those units will get built. There are people that are committed to getting it built. There is the community support to make this happen, and there is the political will to make this happen. So, I think what we have now that we didn't have at the beginning of Measure A is a complete sea change in state law that is really streamlining the process to get affordable housing built. So not only do we have that model to follow and that history, that muscle memory of how to do this, but we actually have enhanced state laws, streamlining mechanisms that we didn't have at the beginning of Measure A. So I'm super hopeful that when this passes, in fact, we can do this faster and better than we did under
Great. So I'm just going to jump in here. How do we do this? Randy, Marie, you all have been through this before. Let's talk about what it means to have a successful campaign. And it is a county level campaign. We need votes in every city. And we have a real variety of communities and voters in the county. So the first thing I want to ask you is, and I noticed a question from Mayor Showalter in Mountain View. Who needs to stand up? Who are the community leaders that really need to get out there and put their name and their thumb and their face into this space to make it clear this is important to their cities and their people?
Obviously, the political leaders in your city, in your area, the county, of course, has to stand up and be counted. But I think that the leaders of the community, the natural leaders, so I'm looking at in Mountain View, in Sunnyvale, in East Side, in South San Jose, in Gilroy, have to stand up and say, our community needs this and wants it. And this will happen in our community. We want to have affordable housing in our community, and be willing to stand up and be counted on that and advocate for it and have serious discussions with people who may not want it in their backyard, and to really bring it home to people that this is happening, this is important, these are our neighbors, and encourage people to have the dialogue that might be difficult in some cases, but make it so that it's seen as an imperative for our community.
I fully agree with Marie, but and also I would expand on that is yes, we need those established community figureheads, elected officials, and all that. But at the simplest level, we all know people. Right? We all know people, whether you feel like you are connected or know how to reach out to the figureheads or not. You know people, and you can talk to friends and family, colleagues, and talk about this, elevate the issue. If anything we've learned in recent elections is that sometimes these pass with very, very slim margins. And so the fact that each of us can talk to 10 or 25 or 50 or 100 people and get them to convince them to support it and get them to turn out and vote can make the difference. So it really is, it's not an either or, it's all, we need all of us to stand.
Okay, we're gonna pivot to that. How do we all play a role? I just want to make sure I see there were some questions in the chat. I think some of them were answered in the chat. Is that correct? If not, team, if you could give me a little note to let me know what's still out there. So let's talk a little more about this, and I'm going to give you sort of one minute each, or even like 45 seconds each, about what you all are thinking organizationally and personally, and with your folks, about the way that you're going to jump into this process.
Are you gonna pick people to speak, or are we gonna go just randomly?
Let's just go around the room. I'm just looking at my three, and then I'm going to do a call to action. So, Andrea, I know you all have been thinking about this. What's your role in this process?
Yeah, I mean, we're really excited to follow as We at Home Working Partnerships kind of lead as leads in this campaign, and y'all have done a great job of engaging a bunch of us, housing justice organizations. So we're really excited to tap into that work. But really on our end as Somos, Así Se Puede Collective, really thinking about what is our role in supporting community to be aware of the measure, educated on the measure, that really understand it. The language is difficult. You know, those ballot measures are really confusing. A yes means this or a no means that. So really thinking about how are we taking the time to host community forums, to talk to folks about the measure, talk about why it's so important, and really encouraging folks to engage. You know, we work with a lot of community members who may not be able to vote, but they know folks who can vote, or their children can vote, or they have youth who are gonna be able to vote. So really thinking about how are we really getting folks excited about this and taking the time to really do some learning together around it as well.
Great. Randy, what's your role?
I think on an organizational level, you know, we're similarly to Andrea is starting to think through how do we engage our residents, our 2,500 folks that live in our communities, and to bring them up to speed on the importance of this measure, making sure they're registered to vote, making it easy for them to register to vote, you know, providing the information on what this means and how you are living in safe, stable, affordable housing, and let's get this done for many, many more people out in our community. So it's really about engaging with our residents and making this convenient for them to register and to vote.
Great. Marie, I'm going to move to a call to action. So give me a 30-second answer, and we'll move on and tell people how to get plugged in.
Okay, well, we're going to engage and educate, first of all, our own community of clients as well as leaders here, our staff. We're going to be speaking at Rotary, working with Livable Sunnyvale, who's a wonderful voice for a need for affordable housing. We're going to really pull out all the stops to make sure that people know this. If people want to support what we do to prevent homelessness and hunger, this is a perfect place to start and do it. And also that for our folks who we serve and we work with, to empower them and educate them and engage them and ask for their inputs on what this is going to look like to them, really to let them speak to the community and be those voices so that people can put a face on it. This is who wants and needs to be housed here in our community.
Yeah, we all have really important stuff to bring to this, which brings me to the real stuff. Can you pull up my slides? So if we can make that full screen, that would be great. So we need everybody on this call to do a bunch of things. One, and I'm going to give you the link and it'll get dropped into the chat right now about where to do this, but we need everybody to endorse the RM4 measure. You can do that organizationally or individually, and that link, and I'm going to give you a QR code in a second. You can do that in the next 2 minutes. Second, we need people to sign up to volunteer or host phone banking and door knock. All of our effort right now is to get volunteers to go out and get to the voters. Every time we talk to people, we're going to do this call to action. Every time you talk about this, you got to tell people they got to get involved. Knowing is not enough. We have to spread the word and make sure those ballots get in. You need to get on our mailing list to keep in touch. This is going to be fast moving. There's going to be opportunities to get plugged in, signed up to show how diverse we are. And finally, you got to buckle up. This is going to be a lot of work. It's only going to happen because we do the work to make it happen. And that's not just the 3 folks here, and it's not just the staff at SV at Home. It's all of you. Can we go to the next slide? So to the left is the QR code and the bit.ly link for endorsing and volunteering. Please take a minute now to get on this list so that we can plug you into these efforts. On the right is a QR code and a bit.ly link for additional information. This is like an FAQ that allows you to get a little more detail on what we've talked about today, and hopefully empower you with some of those answers to questions you're gonna get when you're talking to folks. So everybody on board, really pleased to have you here. I can't thank our guests enough, Randy, Andrea, Marie, for talking to us about why this is important to you, and really for calling us into this movement, right? This is what we need to do. This is exercising a muscle for us as a community to really take charge of these moments and make sure we get what we need. And so we appreciate you being here, and frankly, we appreciate your ongoing leadership in the community. Again, thank you all here. This is exciting stuff, and please get ready to plug in. I want to do some work talking to you about upcoming events at SV at Home. First, please save the date for our next PIA, which is going to be Friday, August 23rd at noon, and we are going to be doing a legislative update. Our quarterly happy houses, which you can see as the backdrop here, is happening August 21st. You all are invited. This is a great opportunity to talk with folks about the work they're doing on RM4, and we'll be welcoming new board members. Lastly, please check out our next deep dive to learn about the affordable housing finance on Wednesday, August 28th. And that again is going to be a virtual event, and there will be more details and newsletters coming forward. I got to do a membership pitch. I got 1 minute. At SV at Home, we believe everyone deserves a safe, stable home. We invite you to join us, become a member. We can't do it unless we do it together. And finally, because we do this periodically once a month, we really want to learn from you what we're doing well and what we're doing not, and how to make it work better. So in just a second, a poll is going to pop up on the screen, and we ask you please to help us make sure that we're doing the best we can at providing you all stuff that's valuable to you. So thank you again, everybody, for joining. Please stay on for the poll. Sign up, get information, volunteer. This is going to be a pretty intense couple of months, but we're really pleased that everybody is on board. So thank you again to the guests, and we'll see you next month.